Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi. So this is Celia from Parasite, and next to me is Andio Lai, who is our artist today for the studio visit. So today for today's section, first let's introduce maybe the space first. We are at Floating Project, which is at Checkmate JCCAC. So this is a space for a collective member who use this space at artists' production site, as well as an exhibition site for experimental work or showcasing their artwork, no matter if it's work in progress or some final result. And there are around like 15 members in the team, and there are like numbers like roster different things showing screening and other experimenting work from time to time. So actually Andio is one of the active members in the team, and each team members usually will use the space as their studio space as well when they are like doing artistic production or doing different projects. So that's why today we are at this site to check out Andio's works. And I'm not sure if you guys can see the screen from Andio. Actually, if you look at Andio's screen, you can see the whole setup for today, because actually later on we will have a live section performed by Andio to showcase some of his DIY instrument, some electronic objects that he create to make sound and performances throughout the years. So we will have a brief introduction by Andio first of himself, and then it will follow by around 10 minutes live section. And then afterwards, we will briefly talk into those instruments that you see on the table, and then we will have more discussion later on. So for this studio visit, since we will record it and put it on the YouTube channel, just to remind everyone that please remember to mute yourself during the session so we could make sure the sound recording is good for later on. And especially we have a live section later on today as well. So please remember to mute yourself. In case if you have any question or if there's any things you want to share or comments, feel free to put it in the chat box. We will look into it from time to time and answer your questions or like react to your comments. And so
Also, when the live practice begins, I will advise you to lower the volume first in order to balance the volume. Although I have the monitor, but yeah, it will be better if you can also balance the volume on your phone or computer.
So before the live section begins, we will give you guys a heads up beforehand, because like it might instantly have
sound
sound, like stronger sounds coming in, but like don't worry, we will adjust it instantly. But yeah, shall we start with a little bit introduction of your practice?
So I'm Andio, and I graduated from the School of Creative Media in 2015, and then most of my practice was based on the learning from the school is one of the particular topic of sand art. But then in sand art, there are different paths and different types of formats or different things you can do. And my interest is mostly based on building instruments and objects that kind of like toy and kind of like, you can say it's alternative, or I'm actually studying other ways to play something, say for example a synthesizer or even like a theremin. Then I'll try to explore how to play it differently, and then that's mainly what my practice is about.
So as you can see, like we have like numerous like instruments, objects on the table now. So I think we should have the live section first, and then we will like go into maybe each object or talk about practice more in detail.
Tough.
So we will now switch to another computer for the volume feed. Just a reminder again, please lower your volume a little bit now so that once the sound comes in, it won't be too much for you guys. So thank you, Andio,
Yeah.
for the live section just now.
Yeah.
So we have just seen Andio using like three main kind of objects and doing this live section. So probably we should like briefly talk about each object
Okay.
or instrument that you create for
Yeah.
as part of a practice. So as far as I understand, this spray can is one of the kind of earliest work that you developed.
Yeah, it's this version is a newer one, but then it was actually a good project that there were three of us, and then we developed different types of things that related to this system. And then later on, we just developed our own, and then I had a chance to rebuild my earlier version, so upgraded it with this, like in 2016, yeah, and then keep using it in different performance. So it pretty older technology, like with the Arduino. When I studied, we learned how to use Arduino as a physical computing module that you can create sensors and all those different interactive works. And this particular project was based on that part of the learning, and then keep developing it, like including a lot of prototyping and research related experience. So the research will be more about
We can go
more
back to the
about
question later.
more about the research more about the history of interfaces earlier, like when I started learning, and then later on it becomes more complex, maybe related to a wider scope of instrument design or something like the archaeology of like studying the past of like those digital interface that we used to think that it's like this, but then within like maybe say for 50 years of development, actually there were different types of instruments, both in computing and also musical instrument, that I find it very interesting that there are something being lost or given up, so that sometimes we quite a bit like during studies, and also in my final year project, I made a thesis about those development of like toy-like or more fun or playful kind of objects. So it is a kind of topic or discourse that's related to computing, maybe because of the digital or electronic parts. But then also back to the basic, it kind of related to the human interaction, maybe like toy or play. What is it? And I think most of the time when I'm doing my practice, I'm dealing with the problem of playing or how to enjoy the playing rather than the sound. The sound sometimes may not be the main focus because in digital interfaces, you can modify the program later on, but then how you play it is often physical, and then the parts and also the form of the object will affect how you play it, or even in an installation, how the audience read it or try to play with it. And this spray can is based on like a distance, like distance sensor, and then there's a particular trigger of triggering the detection of the distance, and then there's like a accelerometer, so I can change some of the attributes of the sound. And then the patch is often there are different types of patch that I use, but then I often use the same one to match with certain kind of external instrument that was not built by me, but then I find a way of playing them together, then become my own play style with my own build and something extra. So this is how I started with the topic of sound instrument and playful objects. And even maybe now I will see them as computer interfaces. Yeah.
So I think we have a question from Kathy. Kathy mentioned that you call these instruments subjects, but not objects.
Objects.
Could you explain the subjectivity of these instruments?
I think I call them objects, but then it's a topic or it's a subject that I put my time and effort to study. So for me, it's a thing, but then it particularly in doing all this like building or maybe making some artwork out of the technologies or the topics related, I often feel they are a certain kind of topics or subjects, but then I still call them sound objects or a thing, because it just doesn't have the living power to move around. But then maybe you can see in other parts of sound arts, they are now trying to work again on the autonomous way, and also with the artificial intelligence. So that's something maybe currently you can see online or in some show. But then for me, it's often a tool that need a user or an audience to complete it. Like if you put it here, it doesn't show its full potential. But then if you want it with the software and all the interaction, then you'll discover the fun or maybe some noise or just some sound. But then I wish people to interact and then discover through the work or through the instrument. Yeah.
I think one interesting that you just mentioned is like all your instruments or these objects that you create would require the audience to like actively activate them in order to create the sound or create different sound wave and different experience when they are trying to play with it. So at the same time, I was just wondering, like when you select the objects, like what it will mimic them, it seems that it relates very closely back to maybe your interest or your background, because some of the objects that you create are related to maybe comics or some other interest that you might be interested in the other field apart from arts. So would you like to like explain a little bit like how it relates to your other interests?
So, for example, this newer one is last year we had an idea about the toy as medium series. Like in Floating Project, we made it in few years ago, but then I keep thinking about doing a second version, and then my particular interest when I was small was like the 4WD, four-wheel car thing. So when you play the four-wheel car, they have a motor sound usually. But I thought of mounting a synthesizer on top and developing some noisier or maybe a synthesizer version of a four-wheel car. So this one direction that I try to combine ideas of some toys with my own practice, and this one maybe is too external. I think it's like you plug something on top, but then as a prototype, it works out quite funny. It's like if you put it on the track and then play it, actually the frequency will change because of the movement. So the player or the user can just tune it to a particular frequency first and then put it on the track, and they will experience a different kind of toy or sound. I don't know how to define, but then I just find it fun to combine them. So this is one direction that is mostly inspired by the existing toys and also what I can do. And also with these things, this newer thing, like also this one, because of the opportunity to participate in some workshop and some education part of the medium. So I keep updating my skill set with some easier tools, like if there are some maybe education program, then others can also enjoy making these kind of things. So this design mostly is based on the fun factor, and also sometimes it's quite related to how to inspire others to do also. Like if for this thing is too complex, I would a more university kind of method. But then for this toy-like sound object, often I find it easier to attract younger audience, especially maybe children or some students, to learn more maybe about sound arts or maybe about interactive thing, even a little bit of programming and also electronics, they benefit. Of course, for the four-wheel car, it's already a nicely designed toy product that you can find. So then this is one path of exploring or maybe like hacking some existing toy to become something else. Mm. And then back to this one is a dinosaur antenna.
So I just want to remind it for everyone. So currently, like if you're seeing the screen with me and Andio on, you might not see very clearly of the instrument, but actually Andio's webcam is on as well. So you could pin on the other Andio's screen as well to see like the instrument closer. Just a reminder. But. So let's talk about this dinosaurs Curator, because like I think in the beginning of your practice you use more ready-made objects or toys to make the instrument. So how does this work first came up when?
I forgot to bring my sketch, but some sketches on the website. Maybe later on. If you want to know more, I can send you the link. And then back to this antenna is one of the experimental direction of my when I studied like this thesis part of it is there is a instrument called a theremin, and then usually it already has a very standard kind of form with the antenna design, and then there's nothing you can really modify it anymore. But with the enhancement of this one, it's like I try to think about a series of work that can attract people and also remove the layer of that. If you look at the existing electronic instrument, mostly they are like a metal box or maybe a more colorful metal box. But then there's not much really toy-like kind of form and also easier to approach outlook. So based on that belief, then I try to sketch how that antenna can be done. Suddenly I thought of this like a skeleton thing the range on this soft dinosaur is in some toy shop, and then just remove this cotton and then put everything inside, and it works like an individual theremin. And something friendly about it is like lots of people when they sit, they try to interact with it, and then just encourage them to play rather. Of course, maybe further they will perform, but then how to attract others to play or to interact first and then discover the sound is one of the earlier idea that I started with, and that project, that particular path of project, I call it like sound and sound. So it's like something here, like a regular, maybe contemporary, ready-made object, but then there is some button, there's some secret with it that you can play it as an instrument. So that particular project is exploring all those ready-made materials and how they form, like with the form, and also with the development of some open source electronics and coding, physical computing thing. We can combine all these ready-made thing with the software that is more like a conceptual kind of ready-made. So it's like putting an old idea, like ready-made is like 100 years ago, like to show those kind of ideas, but with a newer framework in maker culture, the particular parts like the Arduino or other open source platform provided an opportunity to combine things together and create digital instrument or digital installation. Yeah. So this is the reason of doing it. But yeah, back to the idea, was like I did a lot of sketches, even with all the provided tools or technology, but then I also put a lot of preparation before I do my work. I often draw a lot, and that related to the earlier question that Celia asked about relation to comics art. Because before I learned all these things, building all these instruments, I drew comics and I enjoy drawing, and putting that skills back to the sound art usually is the preparation, like the sketches and all the design or maybe some brainstorming. But before I put my time and also the cost of buying all the parts, I just need to do it on paper first to see whether it works or whether the form is acceptable or work out.
So for this one, is it once people are like closer to it, walk closer to it, it will react
Yeah.
According to it also
Is that-
require activation, like, and then Andio like be able to like show it to us. Like in the meantime, I'm just going to send out like Andio website on the chat room, so you could like see more maybe performance videos or more details of each work in.
It is a long time maintenance because that is still the setting that I use.
So is this like something like sensing the radio frequency around the objects, and then once you get closer, it will have like different sound effect.
It's a very old with all the newer possibility, like all these metal you can just buy it easily. I don't think in the past people can have this kind of combination because many of the ready-made like manufactured things are provided. So making an electronic instrument may be harder in the past, but I think with the modern technology and other like profession, you can just grab anything and think about doing a sound installation or something. But then, and of course, that is quite a big community in the online community. They're doing all sorts of inspiring, ready-made or well designed objects that is making sound and you can perform with it. And I think one aspect of the online community is also important because as I study the teachers, they often show newer and more inspiring possibilities to us, together with, of course, the past and other more traditional way of looking at sound. But then the online community and with all the maker culture and all those things really put a lot of impact to the sound art thing, I think. Yeah.
And I think one of the key elements of like probably your work is like because it requires audience activation of the work, and because of the form of it, because it resemble toys or like resemble objects that we might connect to our personal memories or connect to our childhood. It makes it approachable, which is like similar to what you just said before. Like if we think about like electronical instrument or some kind of music box or things like that, we all often think that we require certain years of like courses or study in order to understand how like to make a proper sound, or like when you're studying sound or studying instrument, very often you're like following the very standardized path about this is the right sound you should make, this is the note that you should make. But for this type of sound art or what Andio is trying to present here is there's no standardized kind of format. It is really up to the audience to experience and to encounter and try to find your own presentation even through the instrument that you make.
Yeah, I think one part is like they often try to explore other way of doing it. I have experience. Sometimes, of course, it's at the risk of damaging it, but I kind of like that. If it happens, it allows me to quickly respond. Like sometimes the design of the button is not too friendly, and then someone broke it, and I just upgraded it and then try to find a better way or better solution. That often happens, but then I improved a lot already. But it still happens in some interactive work. It's the risk of damage is one thing that I like. After a few shows, I started to explore like what kind of better way and creative people to do it, like work with it without damaging it, but then often it still happens. So it's an ongoing topic that extended from interactive work. That I found interesting. Yeah.
And also because like usually when we often when we go to maybe an art space exhibition or to look at like an artwork, usually like not many artwork in the past are that interactive or like approachable. Or very often we would think that these are like untouchable and you're afraid to break it. But in contrast, Andio's work invites you to really play around with it, and there's no like danger of breaking it because like he already expected it in the process, and I think it's a way of for you to rethink about the whole design,
yeah.
or to rethink about how to modify it. So each work seems to be more like a work in progress, and it just keep on like evolving, or you just keep on rethinking what is the best way for the audience to interact with it.
Yeah.
So just similar to like we have shown a few works for now, and one of the work like the ball shaped one actually is a more personal and upper grade variation of the spray can one. So so for the ball version one, it's actually called RSG.
Yeah, it's based on the comic book character skills move or move. Yeah. So in Japanese manga, there are lots of different form of gesture that when the main character or the other side character they try to make a skill, they will do a lot of interaction. And based on that, I picked one of my favorite manga, Naruto, and then I tried to use it as an inspiration to design a form of playing that you hold the skills is called Rasengan, and then you just hold it on a hand and then play with the energy, and the sound is kind of substitute for the energy. And this one work that I started to using the LED. Like now it's easier to upgrade with bigger LED panel. Like in the earlier version, just a few light because it's not that easy to obtain that part. But yeah, one aspect of my work is that okay, it's an inspiration from the older version, and then evolved it with another idea, and then also one aspect is that I keep upgrading it. So now it's currently using a easier kind of program. A computer that is easier to use is built in 2017. So it's a newer version, less complex than the Arduino. But then I often upgrade the internal and sometimes maybe even the external to fit the playstyle, because I don't want it to be too complex. For this one, it's like sometimes I need to hook my interface to the computer to run the sound. But for this one, the sound is inside the chips, so I can just take it or maybe put a small speaker inside and I can play with it differently. Yeah. So this is one thing that I keep doing is sometimes look at the thing that I like. Maybe it's a film or animation or a game or sometimes maybe a theory or things related, and based on that thing, try to do something else, like moving on into a weird combination or a kind of experimentation that link things up And then within that linkage, I need to learn new things, and I do enjoy learning new things. Like recently, I am going to do something with 3D printing, and also in some work, I try to put away the sound aspect and then focus more on the screen or maybe the visual side. So often I need something to start with to let me to explore or put new things into it, and that path is one of the major thing of my practice. It's like it's ongoing, like learning new things and then try to experiment it by maybe upgrading the old work or maybe by combining it with other ideas. Yeah.
Just like during the live section, you have been trying to like play around with different instruments to see how the sound combination could change or like the effect of it.
Yeah.
So shall we talk a little bit about your recent kind of state, like since the pandemic? Like it seems that because previously you at first after graduation you are involved with a lot of performances, or like you have more live section with the instruments, and then you switch to probably more object or installation based kind of practice. And then currently, because of pandemic, it brings you back to the performing kind of practice.
Yeah, because one thing is it's the only thing that easier to do at home or maybe in a studio space that like for the clothing project during the pandemic time, it's not allowed to hold any show, and also we can't do anything with so many people. So I started to rework on the idea of playing instrument, and sometimes I invited a few performer or even they're also artists or musicians to share on those like instrument, like we'll bring some synthesizers and also other sorts of maybe program or interfaces to the space, and then try to explore some combination of playing. So it's more like an electronics kind of band practice, but the band member is not fixed, and it's maybe our own friends or someone has an idea and they try to maybe test the projection, something like that. So it's very flexible and unorganized. It's very informal way of playing. But after that, suddenly, like in summer, someone invited me to play something, and I had the chance to work again on a very popular performance with a comic related visual. So that is one thing that like half a year, like starting from February to August, is the main practice is more about working on performance rather than building new installation. So that's one switch, like switching back to the playing side of my own work. Yeah. But also I do explore back to the existing work. Like for example, like the thing here is one of the major tool that I use. It's a synthesizer, but then I rely on its effects and use it as a mixer to stop the sound. And one thing is that it often broke down. So during the pandemic, one thing is that I upgraded its battery, and then I often hack my own instrument and try to make it better for my own practice. And now it's like having an external battery and all these weird kind of function that was not designed, but then I really need some of the instrument from some existing company to work together, to play together with my own, and I can create a much better sound kind of to play together with the sound and enjoy the playing. Yeah. So I do have different synthesizer, like different methods of playing, different combinations. Sometimes some of the synthesizer can be hooked up to the program. They would work together. Of course, it focus on what situation or what kind of performance.
Do you want to continue to talk about your change of plan for this half year? Because originally, I think you were going on a residency program at a board at III, but because of the pandemic, so you cannot actually go there yet. But what was your original plan, and is there any when is it postponed to now?
My original plan was to explore some new ways of working, like more related to interviewing other people or interviewing other musicians, and then try to work with them or work with their problem and then design or try to prototype something to work with that problem. But now it's the program is changed to a more remote kind of state, and then but in the upcoming January, I'll still work on something that is related to the whole program is the sonic transmission program from CMHK, and then in Hong Kong we will showcase some of the ideas and some of the works related to this project. But yeah, I'm not sure the exact thing, but as I said, it's the 3D printing, the very research kind of work approach. I've already talked with some friends, people who play instruments, and trying to explore the possibilities of customizing some tools or some instrument based on that particular problem. So that's one direction. It may sound a little bit related to a research and development phrase, but then I'll still put a lot of possibility or alternative, like all these actually they were based on a problem to like how to combine the spring gesture with instrument, the form and all these readings, or maybe some archaeology, some study with existing instruments. They were often already part of the art practice, but this time I wanted to be more formal or well documented, like with more wordings and all those testing and all the more maybe inspired by the open source kind of open source philosophy, but in an art exhibition kind of way. I want it to be like that, like that the prototype layout here, and people can play or they can touch it. But of course, now with the pandemic, I also think about the problem of asking audience to touch or to press a button. It may be a problem. It may be a thing that will affect works like interactive works, like most of the interactive artists or media artists. Often they require the audience to touch the work or press a button. So that may be one problem of pandemic, that audience may be too afraid to do that in a public situation. And I can see even like with show that doesn't need you to touch anything or interact with anything, the audience are more cautious about
the distance and
the hygiene and all this.
But like despite that, probably I think another thing very important is you're very interested in when you're leading some of the workshop in making instrument, as we mentioned it in earlier on during the section, that you are very interested in getting people to be involved to make their own instruments, to try to use these open source material or programs or things available for them to develop their own instrument. So you have been doing some of these workshops over the years.
Usually the workshop that you organize, you're trying to encourage people
Yes.
to use like open platform or like some other resources to create their instrument.
Yeah.
So where do you usually lead those workshops, and
And
how the interaction with the participants help you to further develop your own practice as well?
actually, the major workshop that is related to arts event was related to mostly the exhibition. And one time is back to the school, like the university, and one time is a video touch that happened, or like festival kind of situation, and then I was invited to some like a workshop, like 3 hours, and then all these are more like different types of instruments. That in my website you can see some of those. And one time maybe is working with vinyl record at the Asian Society, so the participants will learn how to use an already concept. But that one without the electronics is made for younger people and also adults. But I explore the possibilities of using Lego, like in my earlier work, I also use like this is a Lego charger. Yeah. So I often use Lego to do prototyping in earlier studies, and with this one is yeah, just a charger. But then with the vinyl thing, it's you know, tool that people will often related to the older or more vintage kind of thing. But then based on those discs, like in some circles, there are lots of discs that are being thrown away, people selling them very cheaply. So I try to explore the idea of reusing that purpose that to become a more machine. What with the yeah, I forgot all the thing. Yeah, with the idea of the ready-made and combining with the noise maker that the Italian artist Rosso, the futurist artist, and the ready-made is like to show that combine those two ideas with Legos and a obsolete small vinyl discs, and one can make their own noise maker. We like for that they can DIY the like sort of Lego, and that thing is one direction, and then for the other is using electronics parts that are prepared. Sometimes it's harder to combine a coding combine electronics. So usually I'll just prepare the materials first. But of course, it's very difficult to know whether the participants have previous ideas. So sometimes it's too much, but sometimes it's just too few things that they can put their own idea inside. So that is one challenge. But for me, it's like I think in a more ongoing workshop, like for our own members or other artists, when we exchange idea, it's easier to follow like step by step. But in a workshop situation, I need to think very clearly what difficulties it is, and also what material it is, because sometimes it's cost related. And that was one experience, like in video capture, that festival, that there are different age of people. Yes. Oh, okay. There are different age group of participants, but I use a rather newer part similar to this. Like they can play with the LED, the RGB color LED, and they can also play with very simple button like this one to generate noises. And one decision is that I relay on the paper and also cut like color card, so that it's more flexible comparing to Lego. Like they can just use blue tag or different form of paper combined together to extend that sound sculpture. So it's similar to my own practice, but in an easier way that can deliver all those ideas within 3 hours. Maybe still a little bit rushed, but with that experience, I feel very it's very effective that if you put a well-planned thinking in, or what parts to prepare and then what is the flexibility or what is the creativity that the audience can explore, but then I can still talk more about the practice and try to inspire others to work on sound arts or sound object. I don't know, but based on the results, it's okay. But yeah, like recently I had another chance to prepare a workshop, but because of the pandemic, it delayed to other period. But I had another chance to think about another set, a newer set of tools that is suitable for teaching sound art for younger people. And yeah, it's like an ongoing thing. Often also it's based on my other experience in educating with all these media arts tools. Is keep learning for myself also is important. A very important thing because I need to know about the newest way or the newest tool in order to make the skills relevant. Like if you are teaching young people, they need to keep their skills updated with their own practice, maybe, or maybe just because of the newer tools, they can do it easier, so they enjoy it better. Like toy, like the newer tools, mostly they were toys. Like in the past inside is the BBC microbit is a existing STEM education thing. So of course every pass is available here, but what you are going to do with it is the core thing about artists. Okay, there is paper and pen, but then different artists have their own method of drawing. So it's quite similar. But for me, the paper and the pen is maybe the sensors, maybe the computers, maybe the buttons. Yeah.
So I always find sometimes like for sound like that it requires like activation by your audience. Sometimes we really don't have the clue how to play around with it.
Yeah.
So and we have also mentioned it earlier on as well, like it might not seem approachable at some time. So how do you tackle that issue?
I think for things like these, it's too horrible for someone to approach. It's too experimental with all the cables. But for these, it's like a one input design. one purpose, or maybe even these. Of course, it would better casing, maybe much better. But all the toy elements or the friendlier looking thing has a benefit of encourage others to touch it or maybe a proper casing. So that's why I try to explore 3D printing or other more related to industrial design, prototyping related skills or technology, so that I can make a toy easier rather than using ready-made. Because when you keep working on it, you will find it may not be limiting, but then you are just repeating method. So I am thinking about stopping like it ready-made, like doing like these are my own dimension. All the parts are trying to fit in, but for the ready-made, you need to find this thing first, and then think about what you can do with it. The approach is less. I think it's less easy. You can find any toy and put a speaker in it, but it just doesn't work the same as maybe this one. For me is something that have fun, but I won't just put the antenna to another toy. It's just not the same thing, because the original sketch I did this one, so that I keep it this like this. And yeah, there is some stubbornness in my home. Yeah, for the aspect is more like a stubbornness that I think is just like this, and then I'll just do this with the sketch. I'll just do this. I won't do, and I enjoy the clear acrylic. I'll just do a clear acrylic version. And I did have a earlier version with just a normal plastic cup, and yeah, a bunch of very ready object. But then I won't do that again, because it's something very, I cannot say it's boring, but it's not inspiring. Okay? There's not much fun to duplicate the same experience. Just like maybe sometimes like drawing, like different artists, they would extend their topics and extend their subjects. But they, even if they draw the same subject, they will try a different angle, try maybe different color. That's I think is it. When I feel I don't want that experience for me as a art builder, or maybe look at it as instrument builder, or maybe experimentation. I don't want to experiment similar thing. And so I'll try to go to other new tools, maybe new aspects of the top. Yeah.
So, are there any questions maybe from the audience? Feel free to let us know if you have any question. Maybe I'll ask my question again. I think one more thing I would like to ask is, because it seems that apart from the intervention with the toy, you like to build things that show the mechanism within it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these mechanisms, like it might seems more approachable when you can see through it, but actually, like for some audience, they might not really understand what's happening in it. So usually when you display these objects, do you have an instruction or like kind of way to direct people to play with it?
And for these more complex, luckily most of the time it's only appear in my own performance. Then for one or two times I showed this one, I usually work with a touch screen that provide some clues. This is all like that. And sometimes you need a person or a technician or someone to help to station the group. But of course, not every space is. I mean, for some space, it's not quite suitable to have that kind of setup. So I'll try to compromise on some of the complexities. Like I won't use much of the clear design, and then make sure the work is very safe. Like at least they won't get hurt by interacting the outer surface. And for my newer works, mostly it's a very well prepared approach to protect the core of the computer, protect the electronic parts, and the outer layer, make sure it's possible to run at least half a day, like 10 to 12 hours. But one thing is, that if you limit it, I find it quite, there's a dilemma. I can't make it too simple because sometimes I want it to have a certain playability, but at the same time, you don't want to confuse the audience. But then if it's too simple, then it is not my practice. Like if I just have one button, then it's just feel very
There's
weird.
no interaction
or
like there's no exploration.
Or maybe just a touch screen panel with a digital interface. Then it will be just the same as designing a commercial, maybe apps or maybe a commercial instrument. Then it doesn't have that art thing that I usually do. Is more like a experimentation or try and error. So it's often, I think, it's a challenge and also the dilemma of every show. Like one of the recent work in 2 years ago, like some design, I think it's very stable, but some accidents happen and people pull the control and would then throw it downstairs. Yeah, we can't figure it out. We couldn't figure out what happened. But someone really damaged the work and the parts appeared downstairs. Yeah, and that is one thing that you can never expect with the work and how the audience play with it. And also another challenge is that there is the setup and the everyday maintenance is also one thing that is quite important, but often when we go to show, we can't see it. That's also another thing that I try to explore more. Like I don't want the workers or the helpers at the place to be confused, and at the same time, the problem of saving the battery, like saving the energy, you need to turn it on. If you just turn on the thing whole night, actually it wastes half of the energy. So there's some compromise. Okay, so the place there must be some help or helping with the complexity, and that complexity of the media work is often hidden. Like if you are just an audience, you see the playable interactive side, but the complexity of the everyday maintenance. It's actually the other side that effort or sustain the work itself. And that's something that when we study or when we work earlier as students, we never think deeply. It's not a common topic.
I think it's by experience as well.
Yeah.
Like, because when you study, you just like focus on making the instrument or focus on the result, but you never think about how it would present.
Yeah.
Or like you think about the present, like how the form would
operation.
Yeah. But I think by experience, like you learn how to like really navigate the whole aspects, like different aspects involved. I guess like maybe do we have any other question? So probably like okay, we don't have any other question for now. I'll ask my last question. So as you mentioned, like you would possibly, if the residency happened, then you would try to use some online like platform in order to interact with people around the world to discuss remotely to discuss on these different topics that how they approach it from their perspective. So are you planning to do any show publicly to display these like findings afterwards?
Yes, it's standard, but the exact details is still we are planning. But for the works that are shown, mostly it's related to the interview, related to the thinking of improving the practice, maybe a little bit towards the documentation side, or towards the details description of what actually, like, for example, of any of the thing on the table, I can say it, I can talk about it, but if you need me to show it, I maybe just have some rough sketch, but there is not much well documented. Okay, I will try this kind of parts, but all the documentation was gone. It's like history and then just forgot. Like the sensor I'm using here, but then what's the previous one? I didn't even take picture of every possible design. So in the upcoming approach, I'm trying to keep a record of the digital files and even concept, all the sketch, maybe with more proper description, more details. That it may work with inspiring others. Like for this idea, actually came from often in some movies or in some bigger production like game, they will issue a book that contains all the drafts and all the things that they came across when designing. So I often quite enjoy reading all those original initial ideas from those books, and I can feel how they develop it. And I want to capture that kind of feeling in my own instrument. Now maybe people can only understand it with playing it. So playing actually is the final thing that it is. But before that playing, the development or the thinking and also be part of the work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the documentation is a very difficult or like still happens to other medium as well, not just for song or performances kind of art, for other medium as well. Very often we just see the result, but we don't see the development or work in progress very often. And then we just lost maybe the interesting part in between. So especially for performances, even if we see the final performances, we don't see like in between the rehearsal or like how did you choose the combination in between the instrument as well. So I think it would be interesting for the audience to know from the other perspective and know the other side of your performance as well.
Yeah.
So quite looking forward to see the result from it.
I think it will be different than my previous approach to the topic.
Mm.
So like different types of standards showcase with the same topic of instrument or same topic interface, but it's just offer a new angle in my own
Yeah.
design.
Just like when you are playing with your different instrument or develop your instrument, you always try to add in different meaning or like different perspective. So this time you add in a different meaning by looking closely into the working in progress or development process. So thank you for your sharing for today.
Thank you.
And then I hope like everyone really get to know more about Andio practice, about the instruments, and if you are interested to knowing more about his exhibition history or the works, feel free to go to the website that I shared earlier. And then thank you for everyone to tune in tonight. And this recording will be on the YouTube later on, so you could revisit if you miss any part of it. Thank you for Andio for tonight, and thank you everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.